gotta love giant robots. They're a testament to the human imagination. Made up of little joints and complicated avionics systems, they'd be one of the greatest creations that humanity's ever made, if they were real. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the giant robot genre, and we'll also talk about anime fighter jets a bit, which I think are pretty cool. Back in 2023, I made a video called Why I Love Space Shmups, in which I dissected the shmup genre of video games and broke down my favorite shmups at that time, and the reasons that I like the genre. A shmup, as you probably know, is one of these flying spaceship shooter games, like Space Invaders or Galaga or Asteroids. You fly a spaceship, dodge bullets, and try to defeat the enemies. Some of the 90s shmups are really beautiful looking. It was a fairly popular video, and I put a lot of effort into it with lots of videos and images flying around the screen. But I'd largely forgotten about this video, and I've been busy doing other things with my life. But recently, the video's been taking off, and it's currently a big part of what's kind of anchoring this channel. People comment on it a lot, and they tell me about their favorite shmups and their favorite mecha anime a lot. A lot of people agree with me that Gradius is a great game, Dodonpachi is a great game, the Battle Garegga is a great game, and people agree with me that Gunbuster is a great anime, Evangelion's a great anime, and of course there's hate comments. That comes with the territory. But I've been having a lot of discussions with commenters lately about great mecha anime and shmup games. People talk with me about Transformers, X Multiply, Crimson Clover, Gundam, Zone of the Enders. Just a lot of absolute kino. Lots of great stuff. This video, by the way, is dedicated to Matt Mad Dog Wheaton, who I've been talking to a lot lately in the comment section. With that said, let's talk about some mecha stuff today. I will mention that you can probably tell from my voice that I'm not a Gen X, so I haven't actually ever gotten into some of the stuff that feels to me like Gen X anime or cartoons. I never did get into Voltron or GoBots or G.I. Joe, or even Robotech or Transformers when I was a kid. I watched Macross, which is the Japanese version of Robotech basically, but I never did watch Robotech. This video is gonna mostly focus on Japanese mecha, because that's what I'm familiar with, and that's what I got into out of my own curiosity. I didn't watch like the Toonami Gundam Seed or Gundam Wing thing that they were doing in the 90s, or Transformers back in the 80s. So when I was a kid, I liked Dragon Ball, and that is an anime. And then as a teenager, I was into a lot of the classic drama anime like Evangelion and Monster. And I like some of the independent anime anthology films that would come out, like Robot Carnival, which had a bunch of weird robot-related short films in it. And since I liked Evangelion, I liked Gainax, so I watched some of their early works like Daikon 3 and Daikon 4, which were like early anime music videos, you could say. But I wasn't delving super deep into Getter Robo and Mazinger Z when I was a teenager. I was maybe a little deeper into anime than the average anime fan, but not really going too crazy. It was mostly the dramatic stories that I found interesting and maybe some of the animation. And then around age 18, I stepped away from anime entirely for about 10 years. But recently, I revisited it. And after making that shmup video in which I dunked on Ikaruga really hard, I kept feeling bad about it, so I played it here and there. And I still find it to be hard and maybe a bit unfair, but there is this epicness, this nobility, this valor to this game. There's something to the vibe of this game. It gives like old Renaissance paintings of military warfare, like Napoleon on a horse. Kind of this honorable quality of war, you know? Like cavalry charging into battle. And maybe you get that in Radiant Silvergun as well, also by Treasure. You know what I mean? And that's something I've noticed about old anime in general, by the way, is that like old Disney movies, there was this naive optimism to it. A lot of Japanese games and anime in the 70s, 80s, and 90s had this pure motivated feeling to the military games and movies, which you could say is propaganda, of course, but it wasn't all just sad stuff about how life sucks, you know? That's something I kind of dislike about Western war movies like Full Metal Jacket. They're just depressing. There's no joy for life in them. I mean, check out this scene from Royal Space Force, which is an anime. There was this positivity to it. But when you have this noble positive vibe in a military anime, maybe it feels like it's warmongering, it's glorifying war itself. And there is, of course, military-industrial stuff that has come out of America, like Top Gun. But I think that maybe the Japanese are better at it. But I'm kind of dancing around it, but I think it's fair to say that war can look cool sometimes. Some of you guys are gonna hate me for saying this, but Julius Caesar sounded pretty cool to me, or Augustus. That's just kind of a dude thing. And I think the reason Transformers caught on is because it's just kind of a dude thing. And it seems like there's some kind of subconscious understanding, even at a young age, that giant robots are tools of war. I mean, why do you think a kid will smash two action figures against each other and make voices? They're fighting. But a good story needs conflict. And what is war but conflict? Can you figure that one out for me? So I do like that majestic feeling that you get from Ikaruga, or even like flying in the rebel cockpits in Star Wars, you know, fighting for justice, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of layers to why I like mechs and jets and space operas in the first place. The reason that Star Wars is cool to me now is mostly for the politics and because the world looks cool. But like the science of mechs and fighter jets is pretty interesting, and thinking about how a spaceship would even move in space, I find that fascinating. It'd actually need to rely on thrusters, and rotating your wings wouldn't even do anything since there's no gas particles in space to collide against the wings. The reason that twisting your airfoil, which is the wings of a plane on Earth, will lead to lift or going down, the reason that happens is because of gas physics of the air, but that doesn't apply out in a vacuum. So that's interesting to think about. It was fascinating in Macross when the ship space folded. The Macross is basically a transforming Star Destroyer, like from Star Wars. It has two different forms. When it space folded, or space warped in episode 3, it brought the neighboring city with it into space. It was sort of this sphere of space fold that warped all the way over to Pluto. So the citizens of that city became space refugees, and the civilians were brought inside the stomach of the giant mech. And yeah, I mean, some of these mecha anime can really make you think about the science of how things would work. Like, in SDF Macross, there's a giant fish that was floating around in space in an early episode, which the space fold must have picked up from the ocean, and Hikaru and Minmei are starving to death in like a chamber of the giant mech for plot reasons. So they see the fish out there and they want to eat it, and they do end up bringing it in through the airlock, and they do eat it. But Hikaru doesn't have a helmet, so he holds his breath and does a spacewalk, but realistically your skin would boil, and you're not supposed to hold your breath in space because the vacuum forces you to exhale, and through that force it damages your lungs. Also, if the fish was out in space for long, the cells would rupture and become irradiated, so it wouldn't be very good food. But that's just me being a buzzkill. But Macross has some of that noble, pure, fighting for justice energy in it. The orchestral music is really beautiful.
発射システム出力上昇発射1分前戦闘中のパイロットに告げるこれよりマクロスは地方発射態勢に入る敵艦付近より直ちに退去せよ
And it really makes the space battles feel meaningful. It's also a pretty dramatic series. Entire planets get wiped out like in Battlestar Galactica or Star Wars, like Alderaan, that sort of thing. But I do really like the naive optimism that Macross has. It's kind of beautiful. Even when humanity's on the verge of extinction, there's always this feeling of hope in it. So I'm going to talk about this whole noble chivalrous thing that you see in military anime a few times throughout this video. Sorry if it's annoying. You could say it's military propaganda, but I do like the vibe of it. This romantic chivalry thing can obviously be seen in old stories and folklore as well, like, for example, in the King Arthur story of Yvain, the Knight of the Lion. So, I'm going to read you that story, in brief. Yvain was the nephew of King Arthur, and a member of the Knights of the Round Table. One day, while drinking in the court, Yvain's cousin Calogrenant told of a story in which a knight bested him in a lance duel in the forest, and stole his horse. Calogrenant found his way back to the castle, but was infused with a great shame for his loss in that joust. Calogrenant's cousin Yvain, after hearing this story, rides out to the forest without telling anyone, and bests the knight in combat. The knight retreats to his own castle, but Yvain chases after him on horseback. The gate of the castle falls down and the bridge raises, but they both jump with their horses onto the bridge and both make it. But, as Yvain stabs the knight with his lance, the gate slams down on Yvain's horse, cutting it in two. Yvain is now the only one alive at the gate, in an enemy castle. In a weird twist of fate, Yvain ends up marrying the Dark Knight's wife and becomes the lord of that castle. But his knightly whims get the better of him and he starts adventuring again, abandoning his new castle. In the forest, he saves a lion from an evil dragon and the lion becomes his companion. Then, throughout the story, Yvain and the lion defeat a giant, some demons, and a few more knights. They also save a king's daughters from some evil goblins. Yvain becomes known as a great knight throughout the land, the Knight of the Lion, and he settles down with his wife as lord in his castle. So, in that story there's chivalry, there's violence, and maybe it's kind of dark that Yvain kind of stole the castle and the wife from the other knight, but it's just kind of an interesting world. The Dark Knight in the forest is summoned by pouring water on a stone. Yvain's lion stands by him throughout many battles. It's just an interesting world. And that's the thing about mecha anime. There's some of them that are good, and some of them that just aren't. There's nothing of substance to chew on with some shows, so to speak. But sometimes an anime is just interesting and you don't know why, like maybe Code Geass. But I think that Yvain story is just interesting, and it's very chivalrous, if you look past how he screws over the knight. When I look at Neon Genesis Evangelion, it isn't necessarily just that the mechs are interesting, it's the full package. The ending of Evangelion getting really crazy is, of course, a pretty big part of why people remember this series, although the mecha animation in Evangelion is obviously just spectacular. But I do like the mechs, and I do find it interesting in anime when you see those sequences where you get an idea of like the military simulation software, or the command center displays, or the equipment inside of the aircrafts. And I do want humanity to figure out how to make giant robots one day. They're already doing it in Japan a little bit. Suitobashi has made the Puratas, which is capable of driving around and it has some wheel and leg articulation. It's a 10,000 pound mech, which is kind of crazy. And the Yokohama Gundam factory made a 60-foot tall movable Gundam. So we're getting somewhere. But I wonder if the reason we don't see more giant military mechs is actually because it breaks international law or something. I don't know. But there's like a scientific aspiration to the desire to have mechs in real life. And I do wish that we would see more emphasis on the engines and the moving parts in mecha anime. I've seen a lot of anime and there's usually no explanation of how the plane works or the mecha joints work. Even in anime films that are about the engineering itself, like The Wind Rises, you don't really see much in much detail. Even if you get like the Shoji Kawamori mecha art books, they don't really explain how the machine transforms or anything. They're just sketches of the designs. If you Google around, there are some cool diagrams out there of how like the Gundam Zeon Zaku machines work, or like random Pinterest pictures about how to draw mechanical joints. But yeah, there isn't really much. In a way, the mecha genre itself has an obscure side to it. Not everyone's interested in the mecha anime genre, I guess. And of course, if everything is in Japanese, it makes it more difficult for researching for English people. By the way, You can say what you will about the Michael Bay Transformers movies, but they actually did do a really good job of showing off all the little parts of how the Transformers would transform. It probably doesn't actually make sense if you look at it closely, like all the little sheets of metal spinning around. But it looks like probably the best rendition of a transforming robot that I've seen, like when Optimus Prime or Bumblebee transforms. It's a lot cooler to me than the weird blobby transformations you would see in like the 80s Transformers movie. That's just like blocks morphing into other blocks. There's nothing really actually going on. There's also some cool mechanical stuff in Pacific Rim. But that's kind of the best there is, maybe. I'll put in some cool footage into this video as I'm editing it if I find it, but I think there isn't really much super detailed mecha engineering material out there. So maybe you can make these things a reality if you're an engineer, but try to make sure that it's a nice robot like R2-D2 though. But since we actually do have cars in real life, we can marvel at car engines and car factories, so I can show you some of that. And I like the intros from some of the Gran Turismo racing games. That kind of gets into the nitty-gritty. Or if you just want to look at mechanical stuff happening, you can watch How It's Made. I like that show. They just make random things like school buses on that show and they show you how it's made. Also, Top Gear has some cool car footage. But, anyways, this has been kind of convoluted, but I do want to today talk about some of the mecha stuff that I've been checking out lately for the first time. I've been watching a lot of old school mecha animes and playing a lot of old school mecha games. And can you believe I've actually never seen Gundam until now? I had put together a Gunpla, and that's pretty cool, and the manuals are super cool, but I never actually watched the anime until now. So I checked out the Mobile Suit Gundam anime movie trilogy from the 80s to get my feet wet with the series. In my younger years, although I loved tokusatsu and space operas, I never did get into Gundam. I liked a lot of Japanese stuff, Godzilla, Ultraman, and some mech stuff, but I never did get into Gundam. And there's actually a lot going on in it, so I don't know if I even would have been able to understand it as a kid anyways. Maybe as a teenager. So here's the story for the uninitiated. In the Universal Century 0079, the colonies of the Federation are O'Neill cylinders that sit in Lagrange points of the Sun and the Earth. So, that might sound complicated, but what does that mean? Well, for one thing, most of humanity lives out in space. You can look up Lagrangian points and O'Neill cylinders yourself, but this is what an O'Neill cylinder looks like. It has this cylinder with these blades coming off of it. And this is what a planet's Lagrange points look like. And a Lagrange point is a point between two bodies, in this case the Sun and the Earth, where a space station can sit and not fall into either gravity well. Because the Sun has a gravity well, and the Earth has a gravity well. So, usually, if you're between those two bodies, you'll fall towards one of them. But if you're in the perfect spot in the Lagrangian point, you actually sit, and you stay in that point. Essentially forever, if it's stable. In our solar system, we actually have some asteroids that sit in the Earth and the Sun's Lagrangian points. So they call the space stations sides, which I think is a bad name, but don't worry about that. So these sides, like side 3 or side 7, sit inside of these gravity valleys in space where they don't float into the Sun or the Earth. And that's realistic science. They sit between in the Lagrange point, as I said. And so is the O'Neill cylinder. That's also one of the most renowned postulations of a space station that we have. And then there's the two governmental bodies that are at war with each other. There's the Principality of Zeon, and there's the Earth Federation. The Principality of Zeon was one of the Federation colony space stations that decided, seemingly on a whim to me, to fight for independence and start a war. It seems kind of dangerous and stupid to me when you're up against Earth and a bunch of other space stations to look at your one space station and there's like 10 other space stations and you decide to start a war against them. And it seems like maybe this is kind of like an adult targeted show, at least originally. it's more of a real robot series than a super robot series. It doesn't feel like the old 60s mech animes where it's like just some blocky robot that's like Superman. It feels more like realistic, and there's politics and space, and it's kind of like Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Amuro Ray is a 15-year-old boy that gets into the mech, but I still think that a lot of this show seems to be targeted at the Japanese adult demographic, because there's like a lot of plot to follow and everything. But it seems like a pretty cool series. There's a bit of edge to the original run. I like my edgy animes like Higurashi or Casher and Sins. And the Gundam animations are pretty beautiful actually. They're like precisely drawn. And there's a few pretty tense scenes in the original movie trilogy. This was a cool moment when Amuro and a Zeon soldier are fighting, and then their mechs fall into Earth's atmosphere.
落下速度がこんなに速いとは。クラウンはダメです。もはや回収不可能です。少佐、シャア少佐、助けてください。減速できません。シャア少佐、助けてください。クラウン、ザクには大気圏を突破する性能はない。気の毒だが、しかしクラウン、無駄死にではないぞ。あった、大気圏突破の方法が間に合うのか。冷却シフト、耐熱フィールド、全回路接続。
Char is a pretty fun, like, Darth Vader sort of character, with a lot of, like, sarcastic quips. He's a lot like Reinhardt from Legend of the Galactic Heroes, from what I can tell. But I don't know, I've only seen the 80s Gundam movie trilogy so far. But he has kind of a style to him. But Gundam is a massive, massive franchise, and I do want to watch Gundam Seed and Gundam Wing eventually, but it's gonna take a while. You know, I'm entering this bandwagon late, so I've got a lot of material to get through. I did decide to check out some of the games though, and so I tried 2 PS2 games. I tried Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 and Gundam vs. Zeta Gundam, even though I haven't seen Zeta Gundam. Just on a whim. So, Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 is actually pretty good. I don't usually like Dynasty Warriors games, but this felt pretty cool because each mission is from the original story, so they even have the drawings from the old 70s, 80s anime. So, it was like perfect for me who just watched that. And you're actually doing the missions that you would see inside of the movies, like protecting White Base and fighting Char in space before you fall into orbit and stuff like that. But like the other Dynasty Warriors games, you move from area to area and you have to defeat enemies in those pockets and sort of claim that territory. So there's like hordes of enemies, loads and loads of enemies, and you just sweep through them, you know? Because in Dynasty Warriors games, you're always overpowered. So you beat like thousands of enemies in these little areas, and you win when you have sort of claimed all those territories. And you can string together combos a bit, like Bayonetta or Ninja Gaiden. And there's a lot of bosses. There's also bosses from the anime. Like Char, but also others. So, then I tried Gundam vs. Zeta Gundam, and I haven't even seen Zeta Gundam, I've only seen Mobile Suit Gundam, but this game's actually awesome. It's really nice looking, and this is a PS2 game still, but it's really nice looking, and the music is really dramatic. Like, the music, like, really steals the show. Maybe Zeta Gundam itself is just cool, but you can choose between loads of different mechs from the series, and it's kind of like that F-Zero screen where you have like loads of mechs to choose from. And also in this Gundam game, you can choose not only between all these mechs, but you can also choose your loadout weapon. It also reminds me a bit of Earth Defense Force, maybe, where you have like hundreds of different weapons and stuff, although this doesn't have that many weapons as far as I can tell. I think this game is a little more arcadey than the Dynasty Warriors one, but I'm sure there is some story element to it too. In the combat system, I like when you get a solid hit on the enemy, it goes into like that Grand Theft Auto cinematic mode. It'll like change perspective and just do a slow-mo slash. I will say, by the way, that this game is a bit slow actually, but it actually just heightens the suspense. You know in Evangelion how the fight will usually take up like 30 minutes or maybe like 2 hours? Evangelion has kind of this real robot thing to it where it's trying to be slow and dramatic and like really suspenseful. Evangelion really goes for a suspense thing. And part of that is making things feel realistic. So in this, you actually move kind of slow. It's like kind of like a realistic movement to some extent. But with the violin music and all of the like orchestral music and jumping around on an asteroid and stuff, it actually just comes across as really dramatic. It feels really epic. And I get that feeling a lot from this game. It feels really epic and like you kind of feel like a badass in this game. I think I also like that in like the Godzilla games when it's more dramatic and slow rather than the King of the Monsters game or something. But one small gripe I have with this game, I will say that when Mamoru gets knocked over, he often says, "You idiot!" And it kind of sounds like he's talking to the player. If someone buys your game, you shouldn't call them an idiot every 5 seconds. But apart from that, it's a really good game, and you can always just play as someone else anyways. And I do want to check out the Zeta Gundam anime now. I also thought I'd check out Gundam Side Story for the Dreamcast, Rise from the Ashes, but I decided to watch my favorite game review show play it instead. My favorite game review show was the original run of Classic Game Room, all the way back in 1999. It's kind of a throwback. Check it out.
But anyway, today's game is for the Dreamcast. It's Gundam Side Story 0079 Rise from the Ashes. I don't know why they had to throw that Rise from the Ashes thing in there, besides, I mean, the fact that they're Earthlings rising up from the oppression of the man.
Yeah, well, here's
That's
the game.
basically what the story's about.
Shut up, Dave.
Shut up, Mark.
I do like the fact you can just romp through a city and stomp on things.
And blow up buildings.
Blow up
and
buildings. And
kill, destroy people's homes.
that's fun.
Yeah.
Property damage is always a good
Big
plus.
plus.
Good plus for the game room. That lightsaber would look great, like rammed right through a Rax sign or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Word.
So I was never really the flight sim sort of person, but lately I've been having a lot of fun with this Dreamcast game AeroWings, specifically AeroWings 2, where the game teaches you from a flight instructor how to do like Immelmans and aileron rolls and fly information with your plane. This is pretty much the game, is that you do drills and are graded. The instructor teaches you through the radio and then you see a 3D simulation replay of the path you took. And then the game grades you on how close you got to the instructions and the ideal path. And it's pretty fun actually. I don't care for Microsoft Flight Sim very much or anything. I think a lot of flight sims are actually pretty boring. But there's something about this one that is pretty fun. I think that it's because I find aerobatics specifically interesting. Aerobatics being like when you do a loop-de-loop in a plane or you spin around in a plane, that sort of thing, like those air shows. Also, even though I like fighter jets a lot, I actually don't like World War II planes that much. But I like playing like Sega's Afterburner, for instance. I think the F-14 Tomcat is a way cooler looking plane than a Sturmovik, personally. But yeah, I mean, AeroWings is rad to me. I like it a lot. Even though a lot of the lessons are apparently basic, you have to use knots and degrees and make sure to keep your plane really level and steady. And it's just kind of somehow more engaging than you might expect. And I think I've learned some things from this game, which it's nice when you can actually learn something from a game for once. There's formation flying. I'm kind of interested in like the formation flying part of being a pilot, where you have to stay with your squadron. This is all that the game is these like tutorial lessons, so maybe not everybody's gonna be into that, but I like it. And it has like these Top Gun guitar solos while you fly. So yeah, that's it for AeroWings. So, on to the next game. So, remember way back at the beginning of the video when I talked about Mad Dog Wheaton, this YouTube commenter that was below my video? Well, he mentioned that Radiant Silvergun is his favorite shmup, and he said that part of the reason is that it's like a combination of Macross with Evangelion, and those are two franchises that I love. So, let's look at the game. So, I can see how maybe the anime characters look a bit like the Mikimoto character designs from STF Macross, and I can see how maybe the vibe is a little like Neon Genesis Evangelion, but it's a bit of a stretch. But maybe he's played the English version and knows what's going on. But I've only played this game on Sega, Saturn, and Japanese, so I don't really know what's going on. But it has this epic feeling to it. And I will say that this is like one of the coolest shmups that I've played in a long time, actually. And I played a lot of shmups. I played like Ketsui, Esp Galuda, Guwange, all the cave stuff, a lot of the Touhou stuff, a lot of the Technosoft stuff. But I think that this is one of my favorite shmups I've played in a long time, actually. It's really nice looking, even though it's a Sega Saturn game and everything's made out of 32-bit polygons. The music was composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto, who later did Final Fantasy Tactics and Odin Sphere, so Hitoshi Sakimoto is a big part of the vibe of Ivalice from the Final Fantasy series. And the combination of this majestic fantasy soundtrack with the giant mechs does come across as like really ambitious. It hits that vibe that I was talking about earlier of the noble soldier. And of course, a hero is a typical thing in a video game. You know, you expect to see a hero in a video game usually, but I'm talking about something more like the feeling of heroism itself, or glory itself. Like, when you play some of these Japanese shmup games and stuff, you get this feeling of the raw shot of glory or something. Anyways, there's 6 stages and 23 bosses to Radiant Silvergun. And the bosses are pretty cool, I think. One of them is a golden snake creature. One of them is a ship that you have to follow left to right on the tracks. One of them is like a giant cannon thing with a railgun that blasts in a circle. And like a lot of treasure games, this is a fantastic boss rush game. They've done this before with Alien Soldier, for instance, which had 26 bosses. The guys at Treasure like to do hardcore boss rush games. And I do think that Treasure's a Nintendo 64 game, Sin and Punishment, is pretty cool, by the way. There's fewer bosses, but this game is just incredible for the Nintendo 64. It's way above and beyond your typical N64 game, I think. The lighting on the polygons is really good. There's a bullet hell sequence that I thought looked neat right here. You don't really see bullet hell shmups with 3D bullets that look like that. I thought that was cool. Your character has a gun that you shoot by hand with your control stick. You move it up and down and left and right. And you also have a sword that you can melee attack things with. And since this is a mecha video, there's some really cool mecha in this game, like in this scene where you're in like the Gates of Guff fighting the Eva 01. This really does look like the end of Evangelion. It's really crazy. And this game's kind of crazy in general. It was a Japan-only N64 game, but it has English voice acting, so a Western can still play it. But the story and everything doesn't really make sense to me, and yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous. And there's scenes like this where you're like in the 2001 A Space Odyssey Stargate sequence and then you literally fight the Earth. This game's really weird, and even though it's in English, it makes no sense to me at all. But it does look and sound cool, and it plays well. The mechs look like the polygon mechs from Xenogears, and there's a lot of cool machinery in this game, actually. There's like the floating airships from Final Fantasy XII, and there's dudes on hover bikes, which I think is awesome. It reminds me of one of my favorite games of all time, Burning Force. All that to say, Treasure's just really good at making games with good gameplay and aesthetics. Even the games they make that should be bad, like McDonald's Treasure Land, end up being really good too. Also, this is kind of a sidetrack, but Burning Force and the Sin and Punishment hovercrafts remind me of when I was a teenager around 2010. I used to draw prototypes of hovercrafts and anime mecha stuff myself, actually. I have a lot of journals from back then, when I wanted to be an inventor. These were sort of prototypes of like a hovercraft and a hoverboard and the grip handles of a mech, like the ones that you see in Eva or Gunbuster. Also, when I was a teenager, I did these drawings of the Bebop, the Excellion, and the Akira bike. But anyways, that's my thoughts on Sin and Punishment. It's a pretty good game, but let's get back to Radiant Silvergun. So I keep on trying to beat it, but I'll be real with you, I'm not actually that good at shmups. There's a few shmups that I have one credit cleared, but I'm not the best at every shmup or anything. I did beat Sin and Punishment and a few other Treasure games like Ikaruga and Dynamite Heady, but not Radiant Silvergun. And the thing is, too, you can't just abuse quarters like you can in an arcade game, since this is a Sega Saturn game, so it's a console game. So there is no quarter mechanism. In the options, there actually is a very easy mode, but my ego's too big for that. I refuse to play a very easy mode. And so I just run out of continues and lives, and yeah, but I think that it's a really good game, and I will probably try to beat it someday. But there's something I want to say, not to beat a dead horse or anything, but there is this feeling that I get from this game. And again, we're going to look at one more historical example in a moment of like this military glory thing that I get from some of these old Japanese games. And that'll be the last one. I'm sorry to beat a dead horse about this. So, a few hundred years before the time of Christ, ancient Gaul was a great force in Europe. Gaul was a Celtic group of warriors, but it wasn't really an empire. It was more like a group of tribes. But they were an Iron Age industrial powerhouse anyways, and they did conquer most of Western Europe. Gaul fought Rome many times, and Julius Caesar was actually the one that ended up defeating them. And then after being conquered by Caesar, Gaul was annexed into the Roman Republic, which would later become the Roman Empire. And then when Rome fell, Gaul basically eventually became France, pretty much because the Franks ended up taking over that territory after the fall of Rome. But a lot of the modern French people are actually descended from the ancient Gallic people. That territory was just taken over by the Franks. But before Caesar defeated Gaul, the Gauls were a force that would, like, invade and destroy things, kind of like the Mongols. But anyways, the whole point of this whole history lesson is that the Gauls once invaded Greece, but the Greeks slaughtered them. So this here is the Ludovisi Gaul. It's a statue of a Galatian or Gallic man who has killed his wife, and he's about to pierce his sword into his chest. It's a beautiful statue to me. Gallic warriors would often bring their wives with them into battles for some reason. It's kind of weird, actually. If you want to keep your wife alive, you shouldn't bring her into battle with you. But anyways, the Gauls were totally defeated at Greece, so this man decided to give himself and his wife a noble death. Who knows what would have happened to them if they didn't do this act of honor, so they did this. And is this sculpture an example of military glory? Maybe not, because they got defeated, but it's still a beautiful sculpture, I think. And maybe it's actually military tragedy. But there is a beauty to it. It kind of illustrates like the delicateness of life and the beauty of life itself, even in the face of suffering. Life is still beautiful, that sort of thing. And there's a few other Baroque statues from Greece at that time that have this beauty to them that I'm talking about, like the statue of a winged goddess, Victory. Her name was Victory, which the head is unfortunately lost to time. There's also statues of like Greek gods from that time, which are beautiful to look at. But so concludes my point on the heroic vibe of Radiant Silvergun and Ikaruga as well. Also in Gundam as well, I suppose, but originally I was talking about the beauty that you see in like Ikaruga and Radiant Silvergun and some of these military shmup games. Fighting for justice, fighting for your side, something like that. Fighting for life itself. There's also this dramatic vibe that I like in Gunbuster towards the end. Gunbuster was made by Hideaki Anno, the guy that made Evangelion. Anyways, we can drop that subject now. So, let's look at one more mecha game that I played that I liked. Well, kind of liked. We'll get into this one. So, Cyber Troopers Virtualon, Oratorio Tangram. Basically, Virtualon for the Dreamcast. So, this is a game that looks good, especially if you upscale it to widescreen and HD. But when you actually play it, it's a mess. If you look at the Dreamcast controller, there's only one analog stick, and then there's a D-pad. And in order to move around and look around in this game, you have to use the D-pad and the control stick at the same time. Well, how's that supposed to work? You can maybe try to like play with your index finger and your thumb, where your index finger is on the stick and your thumb is on the D-pad, but that doesn't really make sense. And the shoot button is the trigger, by the way. So it's like you can't even play the game. Also, there's this really weird thing where in order to lock onto the enemy to actually shoot them or attack them, slash them with your sword or anything, you have to jump, and then it'll lock on to the enemy. If you don't jump, then it won't lock onto the enemy. It makes no sense. So it's just a really weird game. It should be good. Like on the surface level, it looks really good and everything, but it's just broken. And actually, this also reminded me of an old Classic Game Room episode. Let's look at Classic Game Room Reviews Virtualon.
I'd like to talk to the people who made Virtualon. This here being an Atari controller. Well, just notice it has one button, one little joystick, which is easy to move. Very simple. I'm not confused yet. Little safety pads in the bottom so it can't slide around your table, and you can get that real arcade feel. And it's got this handy rubber pad here, so when you spill your beer on it, it can't get into the inner working controls of the controller.
The control is the main issue with this game. The graphics are good. Oh, you know, there's occasional slowdown, choppiness. I like the graphics. I like the design of the robots.
The design's really cool.
Yeah, the explosions are all like, you know, it's very cartoonish. But the controls just kill it, because the original controls in the arcade, you have these two joysticks. One controls like this direction, the other one, you know.
It's like motherfucking Blue Thunder and shit.
And there's all kinds of, you know, triggers on there. But when they converted over to the Dreamcast, there's major problems because you only got the one controller. But there are two, but they're on the same side.
No,
so
but
you
then you can
have to be like Superman to go like.
You can configure the two buttons to do something, and then you shoot with your left finger, but you can't turn while moving because you have to kind of reach over.
They have different control settings you can use, but none of them.
They all suck.
Are any good?
The biggest problem being you can't turn while you're moving.
The thing I don't understand is that the first Virtualon on the Saturn was fantastic.
So I probably should have just tried the Saturn version instead, but I just wish that there was a good Dreamcast version. I'm more of a Dreamcast fan than a Sega Saturn fan. So if this game worked, it looks and feels like it should be a good game. I would probably give it like an 8 out of 10, you know, if they just figured out the controls. But since it doesn't work, I guess I give it like a 3 or 4 out of 10. It's pretty sad. Anyways, I also checked out Techromancer for the Dreamcast for this video. I think that game is pretty cool. It's like a super robot fighting game, so it's like some like 60s Tatsunoko robots fighting each other. It's a lot like Rival Schools. Also, another game I want to check out sometime is Muv-Luv Project Mikhail. It looks like it has a pretty advanced customization system for your mechs, and it's a hack and slash and it's on PC. I think I'll check that out sometime. So I have a lot of stuff to play and watch. But anyways, yeah, those are the games I've been playing lately. So I hope you liked that journey with me of some of the games I've been playing and the thoughts I've been having about like space mecha anime. And hey, just for the hell of it, I'll do a tier list of all the stuff I mentioned today. So some of my favorite things of all time are Evangelion, Gunbuster, and Macross. Right now, those are probably my favorite TV shows of all time. I think that Gunbuster is an extremely underrated anime, and I think the story is really beautiful. Macross probably has my favorite mechs of all time, like the VF-1 Valkyrie, and it probably has my favorite depiction of what Space War would look like. So those are all S tier. In the A tier, I'll put the old Mobile Suit Gundam movie trilogy, which is good, but I like those other space animes better. I'll also put that Gundam vs. Zeta Gundam game here, it seemed pretty cool. I'll put Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 down in B tier. It's awesome that it has all these accurate storyline missions from the anime in it, but pretty much all Dynasty Warriors games have a really, really repetitive combat, so it doesn't really have like cool Devil May Cry or Bayonetta combat. It's more simplistic, so it's not really an A tier or S tier game to me, but it's really awesome how close it is to the original series, and it has those 70s illustrations and stuff. It is a good game still, but it's not S tier to me. Okay, AeroWings 2, that is B tier. I think it's cool, and it's awesome that it teaches you how to fly in like squadron formation, and it grades you on how well that you do. It's like a flight instructor school. That's pretty much what the game is, and it's fun to me, but it's not a perfect game. It's not for everyone. I like it though. Radiant Silvergun, I'll put as A tier. This is probably my favorite shmup I've played in a long time, actually. I will also put Ikaruga in A tier. I've kind of turned around on it. I spent like 5 minutes shitting on this game in my other video, but I like it now. The Sin and Punishment, also by Treasure, is kind of a mess of a game. The cutscenes make absolutely no sense, but the game is nice to look at, and the music is usually pretty good. I'll put that in B tier. Maybe I'll throw Daikon 3 and 4 in A tier. They're pretty cool. It's cool how they were the beginning of Gainax. Legend of the Galactic Heroes is S tier. Dodonpachi is A tier. Robot Carnival is B tier. Pacific Rim is a C tier. It has like cool machinery in it, as I was saying, but it's I find that movie boring. That's one of the few movies I've ever actually fallen asleep to. Iron Giant, I haven't talked about so far, but it's like a B tier movie. I kind of like Iron Giant. The Transformers movie, I just watched the 86 Transformers movie for this video, and I didn't actually like it that much. I think it's meant for like 5-year-olds. There's like a robot Triceratops that keeps on showing up, and there's like a pink robot that was probably meant to sell action figures or toys to little girls. This movie was probably awesome back in the day. Like a Unicron is cool, and some of the drama between the Decepticons and Optimus Prime dies. I'm gonna spoil that for you. But yeah, I don't know. It feels too much like it's meant for children. That's my issue again with American mecha stuff. It usually feels like it's meant for children. I'm sure that like Super Sentai was even more dramatic than like Power Rangers was. Whenever this stuff goes to America, they always like dumb it down to sell more toys to kids. I watched Royal Space Force for this video. It's actually barely about space though. I was expecting it to be like The Right Stuff, and it is like The Right Stuff, this astronaut training movie, but it's set in this like alternate dimension version of Earth where the outfits look different, and most of the movie is set on Earth, and it's like there's nothing even happening. They're just like walking around a city. So it's like Blade Runner or something, where they're kind of like showing off this other world or something, and maybe it's kind of cool, but it's like most of the story is just there's nothing happening. There's nothing happening for the whole movie. I expected it to be more of a military thing happening in space or in the sky, like Skies of Arcadia or something, but I don't know. It's kind of not what I was expecting. So it was okay though. I think I'll put it in C tier. And Virtual On for the Dreamcast, you know, we just went over that. I would put it in D tier, I guess, because the controls don't work. Techromancer is pretty good. I'll put that in B tier. So that's my thoughts on Mecha. It's probably all over the place, but hopefully some passion shown through on some of the Mecha stuff I like and some cool Mecha stuff that I would recommend. I mean, a lot of that stuff I would recommend. I would recommend Techromancer for the Dreamcast. I would recommend getting into Gundam. It's pretty cool. I would recommend Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I would recommend Gunbuster. I would recommend Macross. I would recommend a lot of the games too. I like Earth Defense Force. You fight like spiders. There's a lot of like mecha and sci-fi stuff that kind of fits these themes that I would recommend. And I did also just throw in some random thoughts and ideas that were kind of circling around this whole concept that I had been thinking about. Like, I had just read that King Arthur story like a month ago, and I was like, fuck it, I'll just throw that in the video. But as for the mecha, I'm usually more interested now in the human stories than in the mecha themselves. And that's probably flipped from when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, I was only interested in the mecha and in Godzilla rather than the human stuff. You know, like, when you're like 6 years old, you only want to see Godzilla in a Godzilla movie. You don't want to see the humans much, unless they're being swatted out of a helicopter or whatever. Now I'm just interested in the humans, not in Godzilla. I'm just getting old. But I do think that the mech genre actually does have some of the best anime of all time. My personal favorite 3 anime are all mech anime. Evangelion, Gunbuster, Macross. But I do feel as well, like, if you look up the best anime ever made, you're gonna see, like, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, Code Geass, Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Gurren Lagann, Ghost in the Shell, Space Battleship Yamato, Eva, that sort of thing. I mean, back in the day when I first started using the My Anime List website, Gurren Lagann was always the top anime. Back in, like, 2009 or 2010 when I was more into anime and I was using the My Anime List website. So, you gotta love giant robots. I'm gonna keep on exploring the genre some more. I still have to play Xenogears. I still have to watch more Gundam stuff. I actually want to check out Warhammer sometime now. I was never really that interested in Warhammer, but like, you know, the deeper you go into the mecha genre, the more it kind of gets its claws into you and you get kind of hooked or something, right? Anyways, what do you like? Let me know what your favorite anime is. Is it one of these two? Trash anime? Now let's go out on this cool Macross Delta AMV that somebody made. If you like this video, I do other essays like this from time to time. I might cover more of my mecha journey, more on this channel in the future. This was a pretty ambitious one. I've been interested in these like epic political dramas like War and Peace by Tolstoy, you know. Russian dramas and all this kind of crazy, ambitious stuff. So I did end up kind of stitching that whole thought process of all the stuff that's been going through my head into my thoughts on the mecha stuff that I've been checking out. And I hope that you liked it. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you kind of meshed with this video. I don't know, it was kind of a crazy autistic thought piece. I'll try to do some other ambitious projects like this sometime, some big essays like this. But I'll also probably fill you in on like my Gundam journey in the future to a smaller degree. And yeah, I don't know. But I hope you have a great week and a great month. And take care.
飛行機は戦争の道具でも商売の手立てでもないのだ。飛行機は美しい夢だ。設計家は夢に形を与えるのだ。さらばバターを